Welcome back to Up Front and our coverage of the Republican National Convention, which starts tomorrow in Cleveland. As we mentioned earlier, there will be 5 speakers from Wisconsin. House Speaker Paul Ryan, Governor Walker, Chairman Priebus, plus Northern Wisconsin Republican Congressman Sean Duffy and Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, who is actually registered as a Democrat. With other prominent conservatives skipping Cleveland, like former Presidents Bush and 2012 Republican nominee Mitt Romney, what's in it for Ryan, Walker, even Sean Duffy? We're asking ABC political director Rick Klein, who joins us now from Cleveland. Rick Klein, good to have you on the program again. And let's begin with Speaker Ryan and Governor Walker, who will be speaking at the convention. I think it's safe to say they've been less than enthusiastic in their support of Donald Trump. So what are we likely to hear from them when they address the delegates?
Well, first of all, they may as well hand out cheese heads at the door. This is going to be about as Wisconsin a convention as you could get without any Wisconsinites on the ticket. And I think the 2 men that you mentioned are absolutely critical right now, representing different parts of the party at a key moment. Speaker Ryan is going to be front and center. He is the chairman of this convention, and he is going to be presiding over the rules. He needs to be fair-minded as a broker. He also, though, when he speaks, is going to be talking about his own vision. It's almost as if there is another kind of third agenda out there. You've got the Democratic nominee, you've got the Republican nominee, and then you have House Speaker Ryan, who's been talking about the agenda that House Republicans are putting forward. If you listen to his language, he talks about Donald Trump in terms of his ability to get done what he wants to get done. That is not always the same as what Speaker Ryan wants done. Meanwhile, you have Scott Walker. He is still the subject of fevered speculation as a potential replacement for Donald Trump. It's not going to happen, Mike, but it is still going to be very critical for him to project the kind of unity that people are looking for, because any kind of break between him and Donald Trump will become a huge deal. Even though Scott Walker, as we know, he'll be visiting a bunch of the delegations, he's got a political future of his own to keep in mind, regardless of what happens with the Trump ticket this fall.
How close can we expect to see people like Walker and Ryan get to Donald Trump in their remarks? Are they, as you suggest, Rick, likely to talk about sort of their own agendas, or will they somewhat embrace Trump in a way perhaps larger than they have in the past?
I plan on counting the number of times that men like those say the words Donald Trump, and I'm guessing between the 2 of them, you could fit that number on one hand. They are not going to be talking about Trump as much as I think they'll be making a contrast with Hillary Clinton. I would bet that they would talk a lot more about Hillary Clinton, a lot more about the accomplishments they've gotten done, whether that's in the House of Representatives or the state of Wisconsin, than they are about the Trump agenda. I think even the Trump campaign realizes there are probably better people than a former rival in Governor Walker and a House Speaker who was so reluctant to give his endorsement to make the forceful case for Donald Trump. It's not to say that there will be tons of daylight between the 2 of them, but it is to say that they come in with slightly different things on their mind than Donald Trump.
And briefly, for somebody like Congressman Sean Duffy, who's from the northern part of the state, a part of the state that actually was pretty supportive of Donald Trump in the primary here, this is an opportunity for him, isn't it? He's coming at this from a slightly different perspective than the 2 gentlemen we've just been talking about.
This is a platform like no other for a relatively obscure outside his own district congressman. A lot of folks know him in Washington Beyond as a former reality show star. He's going to look beyond that a bit, and I agree with you that he's more likely to talk affirmatively about Trump from the standpoint of his constituents, as well as the folks in the House of Representatives who are supportive of the candidacy. Look, there's a lot of Trump support out there in the Republican Party. There's an unprecedented amount of opposition. They'll be right here in the room at the Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland. But for the most part, this is the Trump convention, and people like Congressman Duffy have that in mind.
Final question, and that's about the future, I guess, of the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus, another Wisconsin guy. What's at stake for him at this convention?
His entire legacy is on the line with this convention, in a sense. Look, he put a marker down in trying to be a fair arbiter of the process, and at times supporting Donald Trump against a lot of folks who said, this guy's not a Republican, this guy is not a standard bearer for the conservative party. Really, what Priebus did was say, I'm with the voters. Republican voters are telling us something. He's the guy that chose Cleveland, of course, chose Cleveland for the site of that famous first debate almost a year ago, right in this same arena, and is now needs to see through a winning ticket. He's been the first to say that if the Republicans don't succeed in electing a president, and there is a president, Hillary Clinton, they may as well fold up as a national party. You could also kind of fold up Reince Priebus's future as the chairman of the party. So he has a big political future and legacy on the mind. He has built a strong operation, a strong messaging team. He's got tons of data that's been ready to go for this nominee. Now all he needs to do is win this thing.
All right, ABC News political director Rick Klein joining us from Cleveland, the Quicken Loans Arena. We always appreciate you being on the program, Rick. Thanks very much.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
And are you already tired of this election or the coverage? Coming up next on Upfront, why you may not be alone. And remember, you can keep the conversation going throughout the week by following me at Mike Gousha on Twitter.